All right, welcome back, folks, to my great offer, and appreciate the feedback and the listening to episode one, and so we're going to move on to episode two. So today is Saturday morning, September 30th. I don't quite know where the month went, but here we go. We're going to call this episode the Loyal Nuclear Fallout. And we'll get into why here in a minute. So first off, news. If you haven't seen, and this came up several times, even last night, sitting and watching TV with the hubby here. Delta Airlines to roll back changes to frequent flyer loyalty programs. So, as I understand it, there was some sort of business meeting here in Atlanta. Ed Bastian was speaking to these folks, and I guess someone influential somewhere, in addition to all of the negative feedback that Mother Delta has been getting, Ed is saying now that they are going to change these extreme changes that we talked about in episode one to the Delta SkyMiles medallion program. We don't know what that means yet because it's just happened this week. To such a huge, legacy airline like that. Obviously, meetings, I'm sure American Express is going to be involved in this. We'll talk about in a second as well the partners. So you may not know that Delta and these other carriers, they own stock and sizable fractional ownership in a lot of other airlines. Think Air France, KLM. Down in South America, you've got LATAM. So sometimes those actually play a part, I guess, in some of these discussions. And there was an interesting article I saw this week as well about partner medallion qualification. Now, typically, someone who had typically been playing the loyalty game for medallion status to book a ticket on a Delta partner was not the best deal if you were playing the loyalty game, because you potentially be paying more for a ticket, but not getting as much medallion qualification. Well, the opinion, when I quickly read through this, and you can go over to the Facebook page, My Upgrade Offer, if you want to read all the details, was that that's going to get cut even more. I don't anticipate that changing much. So we'll see. But I guess someone or several influential people, I was hearing all sorts of comments, and we're going to get to some feedback at the end of the episode, some related to this. Pretty much all negative, it is what it is. But I do have a question for Delta, Ed, anybody else listening. Where's Tom Brady? You supposedly hired Tom Brady as an advisor, and he was supposed to, be there to fix this stuff. I mean, I guess commercials don't fix themselves or create themselves overnight, but wasn't at least part of why you hired Tom Brady to fix this? So we'll see where that goes. Now, I also, in one or two of these articles have been posted over on the Facebook page, the other competitors have, I won't quite say chomping at the bit, but they are looking to capitalize potentially on this opportunity. Alaska Airlines, JetBlue, I think even Frontier, but Frontier would be a very different type of what they call status matches. So if you don't know what a status match is, typically what you do is you would send a copy to prove that you have some sort of status with an existing airline. Sometimes hotels do this. and you take a screenshot, because here in 2023, they don't necessarily issue, plastic cards anymore with these statuses, because everything is mostly on our phones. So a lot of times they would ask for a screenshot of your frequent flyer number showing your status. I think the one here at JetBlue, they also wanted to see a recent boarding pass that showed the status. They're looking for ways to validate, because obviously a competitor would not really be able to call, to verify that you actually have status with another airline. Also, a couple of months ago, there were fly-by-night companies that were advertising. I was seeing some ads, and they claimed they could actually sell you some sort of frequent flyer status, which sound extremely sketchy. I have not seen those lately. It would not be surprising if those have been shut down or didn't get much business, but I did see those recently. But yeah, so I actually am going to test the waters with JetBlue. Now, when I read the fine print, there's a very small qualification period. I have not heard back from JetBlue yet, but supposedly the window starts November 6th through the end of the year. So that's a month and a half, and they want you to do a extreme amount of flying. Now, unfortunately, and I wish it was different, but I am not traveling a lot right now. But the one key thing that actually jumped out at me is the status level that they supposedly are offering to match. They are giving you 4 upgrade certificates to their Mint class. Now, living in Atlanta, that means I do have to fly to New York or LA to jump on one of those flights. I believe further fine print says that those are 24-hour upgrade certificates. But we'll see. The worst, like I said, the worst they could say is no. So stay tuned. We'll see. I do have a work trip coming up to Boston in November that may give me an opportunity to get closer, do a quick little run, because I have wanted to actually experience what JetBlue is doing with their Mint class. It looks pretty cool, and I have not actually, to my knowledge, heard anyone say anything negative about JetBlue's Mint class, which is rare, because most of you know that negative news is going to travel 20 times faster than good news, versus all of the other negative press that the the first class and business class from the legacy carriers. Anything from the meal was mediocre, to I didn't get my meal selection, to the service was non-existent, to the seat was broken. I mean, you name it, folks complaining about the expensive seats not being worth it. So I haven't seen JetBlue's Met class, so that was why that particularly jumped out at me. It also means that I have to, with the work schedule, can I work remotely and make this happen? We'll see. Stay tuned. I don't know. If it's meant to be, it'll be. I'm a firm believer in that. So, but again, the invitation is out there. This is the competitive, capitalistic nature that we live here in the United States, and these other competitors saw a competitive advantage. The Alaska offer was also interesting. I know that Delta has been trying to go head to head very heavily with Alaska up in their Seattle hub, and I think winning some market share a lot. So it'll be very interesting now that Delta has chosen to move the goalpost with this loyalty. What Alaska, maybe they'll get some back, because generally I hear good things about Alaska. I've never flown them. Maybe one day it'll make sense, but generally I hear good things about them. And I know also they are kind of in bed right now with American Airlines, because American doesn't really have a network out west, like Alaska has, in the Pacific Northwest up to obviously Alaska and so forth. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens with all of that. Another article that I wanted to point out here in the news section, I was getting ads this week mostly online, I believe, talking about this whole concept of protecting our points. So I think we talked about it in episode 1. Every time you swipe a credit card, there is a percentage, that the merchant pays. It's around 3%. Sometimes, depending on the card, it's down as low as 2%, but it's in that range of 2 to 3% that the merchant pays. I'm sure some of you have experienced, you'll see it a lot of times with home handymen. They'll come to the house, do work for you, and at the end, or they'll give you an estimate, and they'll say, okay, this is going to cost you $500. If you write me a check or Venmo, it's $500. If you use a credit card, we're going to add on a 3% fee because that merchant has to recoup that extra cost. And that, in air quotes, is legal. There have been opinions out there that, it is what it is. It's a cost of doing business, and, they're passing that difference along to you as the consumer. But who does not do that? The big box stores. When you go to buy groceries, when you go to Walmart, Target, Costco, you don't get that option. And a lot of these places, they actually are pushing you to use and swipe a card. Because even though cash is cash, again, air quotes, there are other costs associated with that. Is someone going to run in the door and steal the cash register till? They have to pay the armored car person to come and pick up that cash and take it to the bank. When that cash gets to the bank actually charges the company for the teller to count that cash. So there's still a cost to even paying cash to a large corporation. So there's not really a lot of these large American corporations, they look at it and it's honestly the same cost. Whether you pay cash, whether you swipe a card. Now, let's go back to history lesson. I always love to reflect back. There was this thing called Dodd-Frank. It was a liberal bill. I think some people would say it was a compromise between Republicans and Democrats if you go and look at the folks that wrote it. But there were a lot of other things in it, but one of the provisions, if I'm not mistaken, from Dodd-Frank was it classified financial institutions, and the reason I say that, mostly banks here in the U.S., but it also included credit unions, the size of those financial institutions. And there's a limit somewhere. I can't quote it right exactly, but basically the larger financial institutions had to agree on a lower interchange fee for their debit cards. Now, they didn't do it on credit cards. This was only on debit cards. So if a larger financial institution, think Wells Fargo, think Chase, those larger financial institutions, when they issue a debit card, the fee is considerably cut. So instead of that 2.5% fee, think it gets cut down to less than 1%. It's quite a difference. And then when this happened, behind the scenes, you see those large banks then start pushing their credit cards because they still get that same, 2 to 3% fee, issuing a credit card. Again, this is only on debit cards. And it didn't matter whether you put in the PIN or you swiped it. It's still the same lower fee. Now, to carve out and to protect the smaller banks and credit unions that were lower than some asset size, those were still able to charge the higher. So it's around 2%, 1.5% to 2% for those smaller financial institutions, just to kind of subsidize. They have a more overhead. In some cases, they have to hire more people kind of do the same job. And so it was to subsidize the smaller financial institutions. That is still in place. If you ever go out and look at the Visa and MasterCard interchange guides, it will separate and show you the qualified versus non-qualified. That should be the not right term. But anyway, this only falls into debit cards. So now there is a push. Thanks for listening to the history lesson. There is a push to go back and look at this whole protect our points, is to potentially go further than what Dodd-Frank did and revamp this whole credit card rewards program that is mostly fueled by the merchants, in the 2 to 3%. It's also fueled by the exorbitant interest rates because interest rates have gone up. We have to quell inflation. Unfortunately, yesterday, a longtime former coworker was laid off, along with several other people in a mortgage banking office, because that industry is just kind of treading water right now. Mortgage interest rates are at 7%. But yes, it's putting a quell on the housing market, but it had to be done. That is economics 101. If you need to quell inflation, you raise interest rates, you raise the cost of money. Remember the benefit of that. I actually opened a different savings account this week that's paying 5.25% interest. 2 or 3 years ago, that was unheard of. You were lucky to get 1%. So we've gone 2 years, and now you can get over 5 times the interest that you could get from a couple of years ago. These are all the side effects, and I know it's painful. I don't wish anyone to lose a job, but you have to do this. The crazy inflation that was going on is not there. It's a side, anyway, I'm rambling. But coming back around, there is another push in Congress. Now, this is mostly being pushed by the merchants, retailers of America. They are wanting to cut those interchange fees because I believe Visa and MasterCard, they actually came out with another increase recently. And so it is a cost of doing business. These large American corporations, they look at it and they're like, oh, there's another cost. They got to pass that cost along somewhere and move the pennies around in dollars. So they're looking to either cap or remove. And of course, the benefits that all of us get when we go out and swipe those cards are, points, cash back, etc. So we'll see. But I want to go back to the point. Do you think that, let's say that this gets passed, that all of a sudden here in America, that we can no longer get airline miles for swiping our credit card anymore? Do you really think that is going to have a huge effect on prices we pay? I don't think so. If you look at Dodd-Frank, did that really have any difference? Just because large banks in America cannot charge that higher interchange, did that really have any effect on prices in America? No. So it's already been tried. I don't think it's going to happen, but stay tuned. We are all, we can all lobby our members of Congress, and you can make your opinion known. You can drop a comment down here. Love to hear what you think about that. All right, so that is the news section. Let's move on to where I've been, where I'm going. So a couple of weeks, we are going up to Ellijay. You heard me talk about it in the last episode. We have a cabin. It's going to be 8 of us just getting away. Again, this is perfect weather out right now. Been rolling the top back in the Jeep. It's just, again, I love this time of year. I think the leaves, that'll be a good time to see the fall foliage up there. So looking forward to that, getting away. Unfortunately, the dog can't go with us, but we do have a good friend right down the street that's going to keep Mr. Briggs for us. And he had a really good time there last time. Took him to the kennel yesterday. So those of you who don't know, we adopted a corgi this year. His name is Briggs. He came with that name. And yesterday at the kennel at daycare, because Briggs was bouncing off the walls this week, and we discovered that there was another corgi at the kennel yesterday. Apparently the other corgi's name was Winston, and sources tell me that Winston and Briggs pretty much ignored each other all day. So that was fun, but yeah, it did wear him down. He's napped pretty well, but even last night he was ready to play again. So he's a great dog, but unfortunately he cannot go to Ellijay. The cabin we are renting is not pet friendly, so we have to check these things out now that we have a kid in the house. And but a good friend of ours again is going to keep him down the street, and he'll be in good hands. All right, so November, not locked in yet, but it looks like I'm going to have a work trip up to Boston. I mentioned that earlier. We'll see where and when. I do want to stay in the city this time. I have not had a chance to stay in the city of Boston much before. There's a lot going on. You know, they have, I'm not probably going to get much time to sightsee. It's going to be probably after work, maybe a few walks down the streets and such. But there's a lot to see there. And I did not stay in the city on the last trip. But the office is right downtown, Park Plaza, and I do want to stay in the city this time. So we'll see. A couple of days. I think there's a town hall going on at work, and get that out of the way. And then we're still looking. A couple of our friends, we were almost ready to book. I think we almost had that cruise out of Port Canaveral, Orlando, ready to go, and one of our friends had to have some surgery this week, so we're not committed yet. It sounds like we're still looking at that Norwegian cruise out of Orlando. That's the one that I still like, the itinerary. But yeah, if any of you are looking to do, something for Christmas, it's a great itinerary. It's about a week there, yeah, 7 nights out of Port Canaveral. It is a little pricier because it is Christmas week, but yeah, it's just a getaway. We've traditionally done this for Christmas. Much rather spend it with our friends, have fun there. I did not talk about it. Well, I may have actually added it, but January, over Martin Luther King weekend, there is a bowling tournament out in San Antonio. I believe next week the registration opens for that. So beginning that set in, and then I'll start looking for flights. I believe most of my bowling team is going to join me. Should be a fun week. I've been out to that area. I think I've flown into San Antonio once on a business trip. So it also should not be very hot in Texas in January. So looking forward to the fun trip out there. And then it's still quite far away. I was talking to a couple of friends. There is some interest in still doing the Ireland Georgia Tech FSU football game, August 2024. It's still quite early to start getting the details of that together. They're not even selling game tickets to the regular tickets just yet, but still looking at all those options. Want to put a tracker on the flights, but I do have a Facebook group if any of you are interested for that. So that's where I've been, where I'm headed, and something else could pop up. We'll see on that list. Just a reminder, the reason that I'm doing this is not to replace the day job. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but the upgrade fund, any trips that you may be interested in, I may reach out to some of you that have been on recent trips, just asking for reviews. There's another podcast that's not quite the same content as this, but it is aviation related. A lot of pilots, the Airline Pilot Guy show. I usually follow those guys. You'll also see a bit of my feedback every few episodes that I send into those guys. They actually had some Brazilian pilots on the recent episodes, so I do want to find that podcast and potentially some of them, join as a guest on this show, because I'm sure you guys don't want to necessarily hear me talk to myself all the time. I do want to make this more interactive. So, but again, just to comment again about the upgrade fund, I do have an ability to help out with travel plans. We can make it interactive here in the podcast, and that is a way to generate funds for the podcast, compensate for time, and so on. So, just a couple of pennies for that. All right, and then lastly, feedback. So, again, you can comment here. This first feedback comment came from the last episode. Thanks, Benjamin. We'll get to that here in a second. But again, want to make this interactive. If you don't want to comment publicly, glad to take anonymous feedback as well. Some of these I'm going to talk about are anonymous. But if you want to send that, robert@peachnews.co. Again, that's robert@peachnews.co. But this first one from Benjamin. Thanks for listening to the last episode. And because I did want to get an opinion of these changes, and even when Delta made those drastic changes, the sky is falling, and all this kind of stuff, I was like, United already did this, folks. And where was all the blowback when United made similar changes? And then there was American that also made some changes. But when I read a few more details about what American did, it didn't seem quite as extreme. Also, American is a whole lot more lenient on who they let into their admirals clubs. So I did actually want to get some opinions, and thanks, Benjamin, you did chime in. Not sure if you, but again, thanks for doing that. So I'm just going to read what Benjamin commented. You can see this. So American's upgrade list can be long, especially at the hubs or on popular routes, and that's very similar at Delta. I think the longest I've ever seen is 50 or so. That's quite shorter than Delta's. So there was a comment the other day that someone saw an upgrade list for an Atlanta to Phoenix flight that was 167 people. I'll just leave that comment there. But luckily, this gentleman, Benjamin, is normally at the top or in the top three. It goes off of status level, then loyalty point accrual over the last rolling 12 months. He had a bunch of loyalty points last year, less this year. I'm sure he's going to fall off soon. Lots of small business throwing all the spend into, excuse me, lots of small businesses throwing all the spend into American Airlines cards. I've met people with millions of loyalty points. So, in American Advantage, speak their loyalty points are basically what Delta is doing with the MQDs, medallion qualification dollars. So, yeah, that was curious. And again, there was a friend that had been posting, who lives in Atlanta here, that was posting in a first class seat on American, saying thank you for the upgrade, American. So the gist I'm hearing, again, just the feedback from a couple of people, is that the upgrade waters on American side are friendlier, and the culling that American did when they changed their program, in air quotes, worked. You also, again, on the whole lounge situation, American does have a partnership, I think it's with Citi, if I'm not mistaken, where you can get a higher annual fee credit card with them and get you into a lounge. But I have not seen the overcrowding, complaints like I've seen with Delta and the Sky Clubs. So, you know, thanks, Benjamin. I appreciate the feedback, because I have not flown American in quite some time. I have maybe 20,000 American miles. I do, get a little of activity so they don't expire and go away, because there's a little bit of value over there. But again, I was curious about the difference there. I also have a really good friend out in Dallas that is a flight attendant at American, and their their union was a lot of fun years ago. They had an event in Dallas, and there's a really fun video, the flight attendant Kiki, that they did for a fundraiser. So, um, there's a special place of American Airlines in my heart, for just numerous angles there. So I just don't get an opportunity much to fly them. So, all right. So thanks, Benjamin, again for that upgrade. The next one was from an Atlanta friend. I don't want to name him because he didn't necessarily um, uh, publicly make this comment. But so this week we were talking. He actually brought it up, and he said, "Did you hear about what everything is doing? Delta with all the laws? Of course. Everybody's been sliding in my DMs, making comments, and hearing, what's going through the grapevine." And he, I believe, is a silver medallion. He probably flies more than me. And he has the Delta Amex card, like we do, and everything. And his, he was taken back. He's like, I don't think it's worth it anymore. Everything that he read about it, the flying looking forward. If these changes do go into effect, he's going to start pricing flights on others. He also made the comment, if there is a reasonable connection on a competitor, I mean, he even mentioned American. He goes, sometimes I priced out flights, and it's like a connection Atlanta, Dallas, California, and first class, and the connection is maybe an hour and a half in Dallas, and it's only a couple $100 less than what Delta's charging for the nonstop. Sure, I'll do it. That loyalty, and I'll go back to what Ed Bastian said this week, that folks were going to Delta for the loyalty and or the premium product that Delta is selling and offering, but is it really that premium? I would be very curious to hear from all of you, that have flown other airlines. I even actually I heard from a former coworker this week. I understand now is living in Canada, and he was working out of Singapore, so he flew Singapore Airlines, which I've never had an opportunity to fly them, but I hear extremely good things. All of the Asian airlines like Singapore, you hear very good things, very good in-flight service, meals, etc. When he came here a number of years ago, he actually wanted to fly Delta because he heard that that was the best, airline in America. He sat down, he was like, "This is it?" I was like, "Yep, that's all we have here in America." So this whole concept of a premium airline experience, okay, yeah, when you look at the big three, United, American, Delta, and the competitors behind them, it's beyond that, and then paying a lot more for a private flight. you know Compare that to what some of these traditional Asian airlines have done for years and continue to do. It's not truly a premium product. So think about that. But again, I asked you guys this last time on episode 1, what do you value? If you're in a big seat and you're getting, a meal and a drink, does any of that matter if your flight is canceled? If there is no one to show up to fly the plane? If you're 4 hours late because the flight attendant didn't show up? Again, where in all of these different things truly makes up that premium airline experience? Looking at you, Frontier, because I had a friend that flew Frontier and they had a flight canceled, and he said never again. So, yeah. And then lastly, I do peruse a forum of mostly Delta employees. And this particular Delta employee thinks that the airport lounges should keep expanding to meet demand. That was not a popular comment, I will say. The comments range from airport real estate is not cheap. You just can't simply keep expanding the airport lounges indefinitely. I know that Delta has done something very interesting in Fort Lauderdale. You have the Sky Club at the Fort Lauderdale airport, and then right outside they put up some fake topiary bushes and an outside sitting area to halfway expand the club there. Is that viable? And then furthermore, I haven't seen the ads recently, so I think it's settled down some, but I know that, especially during COVID, the Sky Clubs here in Atlanta, they were feverishly trying to hire people and retain Sky Club workers. So just because you increase the square footage of a club, you inevitably need to also staff that club. So again, I encourage the feedback. Again, thanks Benjamin and others. And we'll move on. Thanks again. This is recorded again Saturday morning, September 30th. And this has been, again, the Loyal Nuclear Fallout. So have a good weekend, and see you guys again soon. Bye.